أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرفهم أجمعين حبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين من يومنا هذا إلى قيام يوم الدين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي وقال الله تعالى في كتابه المجيد وقوله الحق أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ولنبلونكم بالشيء من الخوف والجوع ونقص من الأموال والأنفس والثمرات وبشر الصابرين الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. Dear brothers and sisters, dear mu'mineen wa mu'minat, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear mourners, another year has passed and the month of Muharram has begun once again. The world seems to change for mu'mineen and mu'minat at this point in time. Many people in today's world, perhaps I may even say most of the world's population today, doesn't feel that anything special has happened tonight. For them, tonight is like last night. For them, tomorrow will be like today was. For many among them, in fact, night, tonight, and every other night is simply a period of darkness. Even if some of them may seek certain thrills of the night under the brightest of lights, their nights continue to be enveloped in darkness. Just as many of their days are, despite the sunlight, their days continue to be enveloped in darkness. They go on with their lives night after night, oblivious of the greater realities and truths that exist in this universe and beyond. But for us, dear brothers and sisters, it's different. For us, a page turns tonight. A time of grief and sorrow begins at this moment. A season of commemoration, a season of remembrance commences tonight. It is night, and we spoke of darkness. But mu'mineen and mu'minat the world over, in countless gatherings such as this one, small and big, for them, tonight is a night when they see a new light. They see a light on the horizon in the direction of Karbala, glimmering, shining on the horizon. It is a light that when one notices it, when the mu'mineen notice it, it fixates their attention. It doesn't allow them to look here and there at anything else. And just as a moth is drawn to a candle, mu'mineen and mu'minat the world over, starting from tonight, they find that they are drawn inexorably towards this light. Night after night, beginning from tonight, they find themselves propelled by some mysterious desire to fly and soar towards this night, towards this light. Inescapable, unbelievably attractive, impossible to ignore, unable to look away or turn their faces away. They find themselves moving towards this light, closer and closer and closer, night after night, beginning from tonight. Heedless of what others may say and think about them. Unconcerned about the consequences. Just as a moth is drawn towards the flame of the candle, unable to resist, unable to stop itself, unconcerned that it may be enveloped by the warmth and heat that it is being drawn towards. Dear Mu'mineen and Mu'minat, that's how we find ourselves tonight. That's how we find ourselves tonight. Tonight is the night when the commemoration and the remembrance of the supreme sacrifices at Karbala begins. A night when we begin our flight, our journey towards the light that we see glimmering on the horizon. And inshallah, if Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wassalam guides and assists and helps us over the next 10, 12 nights, inshallah we will reach that light, and it will no longer be on the horizon, but it will have enveloped us in its entirety. Inshallah. Inshallah. Dear brothers and sisters, we are gathered here in this hall, at this venue. It's not a very large place. At best, a few hundred people. It can accommodate a few hundred people. We've gathered here in this small venue, in a small country located in a corner of Southeast Asia. Even in this land, even in this country, most people are not aware of the significance of tonight. They are not concerned about it. And this may, perhaps, especially in the case of our children and youth, create a question in their minds, trigger a question in their minds. Is what we're doing really significant? Does it matter? The world seems to be going on completely unconcerned and oblivious to mourning and Karbala and Hussein and Muharram. They seem to be living their lives and going on with it. To help clarify this, because this can happen, this does occur in the minds of children, in the minds of youth, allow me to just expand upon the importance and significance of what we have gathered here to do tonight and in the following nights for a few minutes. Dear Mu'mineen and Mu'minat, what we are doing here tonight, and inshallah, every succeeding night, and for the entire period of mourning, and inshallah, if God wills, throughout our entire lives, there's nothing small about it at all. Allow me to elaborate. When I had the honor of speaking from this mimbar last year, I spoke about a brother, a mu'min, who I met in Vietnam more than 20 years ago. Perhaps some of you may remember. I had spoken about how he was, when I met him, he was the only person who was commemorating Muharram by himself, alone. Perhaps in an area of a few thousand square kilometers, there was probably nobody else who would commemorate Muharram, because there seemed to be no other Shia in that area. When I finished speaking, his nephew came and met me. I don't know if he's here today, this year. He isn't apparently, no. His nephew came and met me. And I was very happy to see him, very happy to meet him. I didn't expect anyone related to him to be here. And I asked about their brother, and he informed me that he has passed away. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevate his station and forgive him his sins. The purpose of mentioning him and his mourning and azadari was simply by way of an example. The fact of the matter is that all of us have heard of extremely unusual cases of azadari and mourning. We've heard of people, for example, mourning as sailors on ships. The only Muslim or the only Shia sailor on a ship somehow manages to create a space for himself in that ship and makes time for mourning. Many of us know people who conduct majalis in environments of extreme fear and insecurity, where there is a threat to their lives. Alhamdulillah, we are privileged and blessed that we do not face such threats and violence for our azadari. But there are a lot of people who do, and yet they go on and find ways to commemorate azadari, sometimes in secret, sometimes in distant locations, away from populated areas and the like. So much so that I had said this last year as well, and I'll repeat it and move on, that it is fair and safe to say that there is certainly no country in the world today, and no major human settlement or population area which will be entirely devoid of azadari. So when we are gathering here today and wondering, does all this matter? When so many people don't seem to be bothered about it. Well, we should know that we are part of an expansive global phenomenon. As expansive as God's earth is, as expansive as humanity is. More importantly, what we are doing here today, dear Mu'mineen and Mu'minat, is the continuation of a very old tradition. Our tradition tells us that this pattern, this system of mourning and remembering the sacrifices at Karbala began in the city of Dimashq, Damascus. And the first person to start this was Aqilatu Bani Hashim, Hazrat Zainab Salamullah alayha. It started back then in the year 61 Hijri. We are now at the start of 1446 Hijri. And it continued after it began in the year 61 Hijri. It continued. Every Imam, every Ma'asum, every follower of the Imam, every Alim, every Mu'min, they've continued this tradition that was established 1400 years ago. By way of an example, let me just speak of one example. Our eighth Imam, Imam Ali al-Rida alayhi salatu wassalam, please recite a salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Many of us have been fortunate enough to visit his shrine in Mashhad. And inshallah, those who haven't, may inshallah Allah Ta'ala grant them the opportunity and privilege to do so at the earliest. And those who have, may Allah grant them the privilege to do so again and again, inshallah. When he was forced to move from Medina to Marv by the Khalifa of the time, Ma'mun al-Abbasi, Marv is a small ruined settlement in present-day Turkmenistan, close to the border with Iran. It's a small ruined site. When he was forced to move to Marv back at that time, he was obviously disconnected from his society and community of followers and students and believers because of this forced migration. And the Mu'mineen would then undergo great hardships to somehow travel to Marv and see him. One of the Mu'mineen who undertook this journey is a famous poet. And he was much more than a poet, and we'll come to that in a few minutes. The famous poet De'bal al-Khuzai. He was one of those who undertook this journey. And he went to Marv. There are some interesting incidents that happened that have been recorded in our books of hadith and history. But there isn't time to delve on, to elaborate on them today. Inshallah, on some other night, we'll come to those. De'bal says that when I arrived in Marv, the month of Muharram had begun. And when I was fortunate to arrive in the presence of my master, of Imam al-Rida alayhi salam, when I was fortunate to arrive in his presence, I found him surrounded by a group of people, all of them bowing their heads in grief. This is more than 100 years after the event of Karbala. Approximately 140 years after the events of Karbala. I found them bowing their heads in grief. And when I arrived, I was warmly welcomed by my master. And then he ordered that a curtain be put up in that room or wherever, that hall. And then he asked the ladies of his house to come and sit behind the curtain. So it was one place with the men on one side, the women and the ladies on the other side, separated by a curtain. And then he commanded me, he said, Ya De'bal, Irthil Hussein. Irthil Hussein. Recite a marthia for Hussein. Dear brothers and sisters, when we gather here today and we recite our marasi, our marsiyas, our nohas, our latmiyas, these musibah, this masaib, We are in fact continuing a tradition that was established by our ma'soom and infallible masters centuries ago. Isn't that enough for us to appreciate the importance and import of what we are doing here today? Small or big, grand or simple, our gatherings, our commemoration, our azadari is a link in this holy chain that was begun by the Ma'sumin alayhimus salam themselves. By themselves. Dear brothers and sisters, it is the Ma'sumin alayhimus salam, or let me be more precise and direct. It is Imam Hussain alayhis salam himself who has arranged for this program to be held. Sure, all of us have played our roles. And may Allah reward each and every person who has played the smallest role in organizing this and such other programs. But the reality is that we are merely tools. These programs are in fact managed by Imam Hussain himself. It is he who decides and invites each and every one of us to be here. It is he who arranges for those of us who are able to come here to arrive. You know, there are many people who are not able to arrive, who are not able to come, who are not able to participate in any gathering, who are not able to take time out from whatever is keeping them busy to take part in the important events that begin from tonight. It is a blessing, it is a privilege that is granted to a number of people. Of course, it doesn't mean that those it is granted to are in any way superior to the others. It simply means that they have been chosen for this kindness, and therefore it is upon them to repay this kindness in an appropriate fashion, and we'll come to that inshallah in the coming nights. It is Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wassalam who is in fact managing and conducting these ceremonies. And if, dear brothers and sisters, these gatherings belong to Imam Hussain, and they surely do, if these gatherings belong to Imam Hussain and to the other martyrs of Karbala, then the only proper purpose of these gatherings can only be whatever was the purpose of Imam Hussain and his followers in Karbala. Inshallah, we'll elaborate about this purpose, inshallah, in the coming nights. But let me tonight, just by way of preparing ourselves for the coming discussions, there is very little time as well. Let me simply mention a couple of things that cannot be the proper purpose of tonight's gathering or any gathering of this kind. Things that cannot be. Inshallah, we will come to the proper purpose, inshallah, in the following nights. Dear brothers and sisters, dear mu'mineen wa mu'minat, dear mourners and lovers of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, if I, as a speaker, sit on this mimbar and speak with the purpose of displaying my talents, this cannot be the proper purpose of this gathering. This cannot be the proper purpose of my role and share in this gathering. If my purpose is that at the end of this talk, this majlis, people should come up to me and say, wow, that was great, that was wonderful, or that I should be invited again year after year. This cannot be the proper purpose of my share in this. And each of us has a share. Somebody is reciting a Marsiya, somebody is the announcer, Noha, somebody is arranging for the food, distributing the food. Everything that we are doing has to be commensurate and in line with the purpose of Imam Hussein and his followers. And if we find in ourselves, tonight is the first night, let me first address myself, speaking to myself. If I find tonight that a part of me is seeking affirmation, admiration, then this is a very dangerous sign, and I should act rapidly to correct myself from tonight itself, because tomorrow night may be too late. Tomorrow night may already be too late. I am here. If I start to think that I am here as a performer, not as a servant in this mission, that means I haven't got things right. And each of us can be faced with a similar problem, even an ordinary participant. It may even occur that an ordinary participant who is in no way, has no share in what is called organizing this program. This is what I mean by ordinary here, nothing else. It may even be that such an individual, when it comes to crying over Hussein, may find that there is a part of him that wants to cry in a way that leads to others saying, oh wow, he really, really loves Imam Hussein. We aren't performers here. This isn't a performance. We are here as servants. We are here as participants. Each of us, participants in a mission that began centuries ago in a land far away from here. Please recite a salawat by Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Salli ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Please recite a salawat and come forward. Another salawat, please. Allahumma salli. And here it is, dear brothers and sisters, that I would just like to draw attention to what the ulama, what our scholars refer to as the adab of the commemoration of Muharram. Adab. Now this is a word that is almost impossible to translate into English. Frequently translated as etiquettes, but it doesn't capture the meaning. I will say etiquettes because it kind of brings us closer to it, but it isn't the translation. And please don't seek a translation, because a precise translation, because many words are untranslatable, because their meaning is understood in the wider cultural and civilizational context from which they arise. Let me give you another example of a word that's impossible to translate. There is a word in the Arabic language, it's there in many other Muslim languages as well, including Urdu. I don't know about Malay. A word called ghairat. Ghairat. I challenge anybody to translate this precisely into English. Similarly, words like haya. These are words that are impossible to translate in a precise fashion. If you end up saying shyness, it's not the same meaning. If you say chastity, it's not the same meaning. The foundational concepts that belong to particular civilizations are frequently impossible to translate in a precise manner into any other language, because their meaning isn't visible in a standalone fashion. Their meaning is supported by tens of other concepts that touch upon them. Anyway, this was just an aside. So when it comes to the adab, frequently partially translated as etiquettes, our scholars speak about the adab of the commemoration of Muharram, the adab of Aza. And they speak of two kinds of adab in this regard. There are those adab which pertain to the outward forms of our life, the zahiri adab pertain to the outward forms of our life. And they invite us to follow these adab. And these are adab, many of which are followed by us. This wearing of black, being dressed in black, this participation in mourning ceremonies such as this. Many of us change our daily routine to be able to participate in this or in other programs. There are people who in fact take a vacation, they take time off from their work, their businesses, travel to some other places to be able to participate. There are people who change the use and consumption of their devices, mobile, television, entertainment, and the like in this month. These are all adab that pertain to the outward forms of the commemoration of Ashura. And each of these are important. These are very important. Our families, our children in particular children growing up in societies which are not Muslim, which are not Shia, they need to see these adab. They need to experience this change in lifestyle and daily life that begins on a night such as this. It's very important. I mean, none of us should in any way underestimate the importance of these things. For example, by saying, oh, these are just outward forms and what matters is what's in our hearts. Surely what matters is what's in our hearts. But that doesn't mean that what is outside doesn't matter at all, because it has an impact on what is in our hearts. It is connected to what is in our hearts. And if it doesn't have an impact on my heart or your heart, it certainly has an impact on the hearts of the young and the impressionable among us. But more important than these zahiri elements, these outward forms of adab, are of course the inner and batini adab. And inshallah in the coming nights we'll elaborate on them. But most importantly, it is that the condition of our hearts, the condition of grief in our hearts, are we able to maintain that during these 10 days at a minimum? The condition of sincerity and ikhlas in our hearts, are we able to hold that for these 10 days at a minimum? And of course, above all, the will to participate in the Husseini mission. Are we able to inculcate that in ourselves during these 10 days in such a way that when we exit these 10 days, we are changed, not just momentarily, not just in a transitory fashion, but in a lasting manner. Inshallah, we'll come to these things in the coming nights. Dear brothers and sisters, back in the time, the events that we're here to commemorate, 1400 years ago, the events of Karbala began with a rejection. They began with a rejection. It is the 60th year of Al Hijrah, and the governor of Medina has called Hussein ibn Ali and informed him that Yazid has passed away. And he demands that Hussein declare his allegiance. Bay'ah. Imam Hussein alayhi salam at that point in time was already the Imam for 10 years. His Imamat began 10 years prior to this, with the Shahada of Imam Hassan alayhi salam. During these 10 years, it was Muawiyah who was ruling as the Khalifa. During this time, Muawiyah made no demands of allegiance and bay'ah from Imam Hussein, just as he made no such demand from the previous Imam, from Imam Hassan. Muawiyah, by the way, ruled for an enormously, painfully long 20-year period. Very long period. But no demand was made of the Imams to declare their allegiance. That's because Muawiyah, whatever he was, and we know what he was not a foolish man. He understood that such an effort, such a demand would backfire. But his son Yazid, of course, was a different animal altogether. So we have Imam Hussein alayhi salam in his old age reflecting upon what has happened to Islam during this time. Imam Hussein alayhi salam was a child when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. He was a child when Islam had been established in Medina, and Islam had acquired a position of authority and power in the Arabian Peninsula. He was a child when the ruler of the Muslim society was the Holy Prophet himself. And when he now looks back and compares this time with that time, he is gripped with an immense sense of grief to see that Muslim society has come to this. In his own lifetime, the center of this society, which used to be the holy presence of the Messenger, has now been replaced by a callous, cruel, sinning young man called Yazid, who claims that he is the Khalifa. Brothers and sisters, we know the word Khalifa means the replacement, or it means the successor. So when somebody claims himself to be the Khalifa, he's not saying I'm the ruler. He's saying I am the successor. I occupy the same position and authority that the Holy Messenger used to. It is at this point that Imam Hussein alayhi salam understands that the strategy that has been adopted over the last 10 years of his Imamat must change. The last 10 years has been a strategy of avoidance. It has been a strategy of avoidance. Imam Hussein alayhi salam has consistently avoided direct conflict with the usurping power, with the Khalifa. He has stayed in Medina. He has focused on training and developing a small number of faithful followers. and he has abstained from intervening in other affairs anywhere else. But now, with Yazid claiming this position, Imam Hussain alayhi salam realizes that the earlier strategy cannot continue. It cannot continue. Yazid claiming this position is a calamity, dear brothers and sisters, and I do not need to elaborate why. But even bigger than this calamity, Mu'mineen and Mu'minat, is the fact that nobody in the entire Islamic Ummah objected to Yazid's usurpation of power. This is the depth to which society had sunk at that time. It's bad enough that Yazid is in power. It's even worse that nobody is raising their voices. So the strategy of avoidance cannot continue. It has to be replaced by a strategy of outright rejection. And this is why Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wassalam decides to leave the city of Medina and head out towards Makkah. It is to declare his open rejection of the new state of affairs that has been forced upon the Muslim Ummah. But leaving Medina isn't going to be easy, dear brothers and sisters. Medina is the city where he grew up. Dear brothers and sisters, Medina is the city where in his childhood he used to climb upon the shoulders of the messenger while he would be offering salat. And the messenger would prolong his sujood so that he would stay upon his shoulders. Leaving Medina is difficult above all because this is the place where the holy messenger is buried. And it is beside his grave that Imam Hussain alayhi salam comes to say goodbye. A noor, a light rises from this grave, dear brothers and sisters. Imam Hussain alayhi salam is drawn towards the grave. Sheikh Saduq in Al-Amali writes that Imam Hussain alayhi salam stood by the grave and prayed 2 rak'ah of salat. And then after that he went into sajda. And while he was in sajda, he dozed off. And Shaykh Saduq writes, فَجَاءَهُ النَّبِي صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. He saw in his dream, فِي مَنَامِهِ. He saw while asleep in his dream, in this world of vision and mukashifa, he saw the holy messenger come to see him. Imam Hussain it's been such a long time that he has seen his dear grandfather. He is enveloped by immense bliss and joy to be able to see him again. But this isn't a joyous occasion, dear brothers and sisters. This isn't a joyous occasion. Imam Hussain alayhi salam calls out to his grandfather, "Oh grandfather, I am aching to see you again. I am aching to be with you again." But what does the messenger tell him? كَأَنِّي أَرَاكَ مُؤَمَّرًا بِدَمِكَ. Oh Hussain, I can see you bathed in your own blood, Hussain. Baina asabatin min ummati, surrounded by a group of thugs from my own ummah. They are attacking you. Some of them are throwing stones at you. Someone is throwing a spear. Someone is heading to you with a sword. وَهُمْ يَرْجُونَ شَفَاعَتِي. And they are doing all this while they continue to claim and hope for my intercession. Shaykh Saduq goes on to write that Imam Hussain alayhi salam tells him, "Oh grandfather, take me with you. Take me with you." The Nabi replies, the Prophet replies, "Wait a little. Have a little sabr, Hussain. Your mother, your mother Fatima, your father Ali, all of them are eagerly awaiting to see you. But my dear Hussein, inna laka darajatin. Hussein, there are certain stations and positions for you in the hereafter. La tanaluha illa bishahada. Certain stations and positions that you cannot achieve except through martyrdom. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah al-ali al-azim. سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.